to today's Legal Insight session. Today is March the 28th, 2024. Before we introduce our speakers, I just wanted to give a couple of updates. Remember, we are gearing up for Paralegal Day, and that is a time that we like to recognize paralegals for their many contributions. We are accepting registration. We would like to recognize paralegals that are celebrating years of service. If this year marks your 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th, or 30th year of service as a paralegal, we would like to recognize that in 5-year increments only, please. You can go to the website to sign up for that. That will be a recognition during Paralegal Day. Also, we will be awarding our Paralegal of the Year Award, Sustaining Member of the Year, and Law Firm Legal Department of the Year Award during our Paralegal Day celebration on May 20th. Nominations are being accepted through April the 1st. We do need time to make our selections and order the awards and get those in before the 20th of May. So we are accepting those nominations through April the 1st. And so you put your thinking caps on. Think about, we all know paralegals who go above and beyond every day and just go out of their way to do everything possible for their attorneys, their firms, their clients, the paralegal profession in general. Maybe somebody who's a mentor to paralegal students, maybe somebody's out there in the community doing awesome pro bono work. We would love to have your nominations for these awards. And Sustaining Member of the Year, obviously we have a lot of fantastic sustaining members who do a lot of work for us. There's Anderson Reporting, Spectrum Reporting, Veritext, Dean Borger, Investigative Services, and several others whose names are escaping me right now off the top of my head. But we would like to recognize one of them for being outstanding. Also, we have our scholarships that will be awarded on Paralegal Day. We have one $500 scholarship for students enrolled in a paralegal program at Columbus State or an affiliated program, and one $250 scholarship for paralegals who are signed up to sit for the OSBA paralegal certification exam in May. So go ahead and get those applications in as well. I think that will do it for our announcements. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we are so pleased and so excited to have with us 3 attorneys who have one thing in common. They all have also been a paralegal in the past. And we're excited in commemoration of International Women's Day to talk to these ladies and find out what their career path has been. First, we have Nelva Smith. Nelva is an attorney with the firm of Steptoe & Johnson. She's a labor and employment attorney with wide-ranging experience that makes her an extremely effective advisor for her clients. She handles general day-to-day counseling, litigation. She handles workers' compensation, safety and health issues, and all kinds of labor and employment issues. Also, joining us today, we have Nita Hansen. Nita is an attorney. She has been an attorney in a couple of different firms over her career. Most recently, she served as township administrator for Etna Township. And before that, she was an associate at Dinsmore and Shoal and at Stanley Law Group. And also, she served as a paralegal at Stanley Law Group and Thompson Hine. I apologize, ladies. I'm just trying to do very quick introductions so that we can get to the heart of the matter.
No
Teresa,
problem.
Teresa Hardiman is an attorney at the firm of Fisher Phillips, and she also handles employment discrimination and harassment and litigation matters. Teresa's trajectory has been a little bit different. She was an attorney before she began working as a paralegal. And
I was a paralegal before an attorney.
oh, I'm sorry. I
okay.
guess I had misunderstood that.
Yeah.
So all three of these ladies began their careers as paralegals and decided to make the leap from paralegal to attorney. Now that sounds like a massive undertaking. So we'll just start out, ladies, if you would share a little bit about yourselves, what your career has looked like, you know, what made you decide to become an attorney? Was the law always your goal, or did you just kind of end up there? And how did you progress through your profession so far?
Well, I'll just volunteer to go first on that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
So I had never even really considered the law. I did clerical work at a company, and at that time, and I'm talking about 1980, so at a time when some of you probably might not have been born, but the company that I worked for used what was at the time state-of-the-art word processing. And a local law firm was transitioning from electric typewriters to word processing. And so they worked with that company and said, hey, do you have someone that you could recommend that is a proficient operator? Because we can train that person in the law. So that's how I was first introduced to the law. And I worked with the same lawyer for 19 years. I followed him at a couple of different firms, and I worked with him for 19 years. And during that time, my love for the law, my love for litigation, I was just so blessed to work for someone who was a great mentor, who was a fantastic lawyer and an great person. And so in 1999, I guess it was, I transitioned to Thompson Hine. And it was at that time that my husband and I said, you know, we think now would be the right time for us, for you to go ahead and make application to law school. So I was accepted to Capital. Our children were small at the time, or young. They weren't really small children, but young children. My son learned to drive while I was in law school. But so that meant that I went to law school 3 nights a week, and I was a litigation paralegal full time by day. And so and then while I was in law school, the evening program is a 4-year program. So in my 4th year of law school, I went to Stanley Law Group and was a paralegal there for my last year of law school, and then stayed as a lawyer until 2012, when I went to Dinsmore, and I practiced at Dinsmore until I left in 2023 to become the township administrator for Etna Township. So that was, I'm sure that as well echo the fact that you have to really be committed. It was just something I absolutely desired to do. Otherwise, the effort was so hard, and my family made such sacrifice that if it wasn't something that I just longed to do, it would not have been worth it. But it was worth it. I'm thrilled. I loved practicing law when I was a litigator at Dinsmore, and although I'm not currently practicing as a lawyer, who knows? I may return to the practice at some point.
Outstanding.
I'll just piggyback off that because Nita and I went to law school together. I don't know if she remembers that.
Oh, wow.
But we were at the same 4 years at Capital in the night program. We were doing that. She was in my class. I remember we had pretty much all our classes together, at least the standard classes. But I started law school prior to becoming a paralegal. I had done my first year of law school and then got hired at the firm that I actually worked with Angie at, as kind of a, I don't have a paralegal certification. So I was a legal assistant, sort of thing. They couldn't call me officially a paralegal, but I came in doing what Angie did at that firm. And again, I was, went to school 3 nights a week, studied on the nights you don't have school, and worked full time as a paralegal. And we mostly did workers' comp at that law firm. But I would say I was blessed to work with great paralegals that I could mentor, who could teach me, Angie being one of them. And we had a couple other at that firm as well that had been there for many, many years, that could teach me exactly how to do what they do and how to help the attorneys, to make sure that I knew what I was doing to make their life easier. And so I, kind of already knew I wanted to do law when I started being a paralegal, and just continue that. And then again, was very blessed when I graduated to just stay with the firm, and was able to become an attorney with them. But I thought that helped begin, I knew what the paralegals had to go through and what they needed to do. So I thought that was a huge help for me, and stayed with that firm for 10 years, and then moved to Steptoe & Johnson, where I'm at now, and have been there for 8 years. So again, it was interesting progress, but I've stayed with kind of like Nita, stayed with the same attorney for all those years, which has also been really great. But it was like Nita said, it was a lot of work. You had to be dedicated to do that, to work full time and go to school at night. But, in the end, it was worth it to come with what it is these days.
So I had a little bit of a different experience. I did not want to do the law. It was the last thing I wanted to do. My parents were both attorneys. And they had pushed it on me ever since I was younger. Obviously, parents know best. I'm eating crow now, but they were right. But because they were pushing it on me, I wanted to do anything but that. I grew up, I kind of came of age right when Sex and the City was everything. And I wanted to be a Samantha Jones. I wanted to move to New York. I wanted to do public relations or marketing or something in entertainment. And I kind of did that. I did move to New York after undergrad, and I worked for a professional sports team for a little bit. And that team was the second worst in the league. And they went through a round of massive layoffs. And I think about that every sports season when I see who's last in their league. I think, oh, there are going to be some job cuts there. Something you never thought about before, but now that I have the experience, I can't not think about it. So my department went from 25 to 5 in one swoop. It was a massive layoff. And I was out in New York. I only had my undergrad degree, which New York is a very oversaturated market. Kind of my undergrad degree didn't really mean anything out there. And my family's here, we're based here. So I didn't even have any connections, and I was unemployed for 3 or 4 months, really struggling to just find any job. I mean, I was applying for any and everything. And one of those jobs was to be a paralegal. Now, in college and undergrad, I had interned with Ron O'Brien, our Franklin County prosecuting attorney. So I had some experience there. And without a paralegal certificate, this law firm interviewed me. I got the job, and that's kind of, all she wrote. I did that for 2 years. My best friend in the firm, we actually shared an office, and he said he was going to take the LSAT. And I said, well, if you're leaving, I'm leaving. So I took the LSAT too. I had kind of also gotten, a little bit hungrier for more control and autonomy. I think it was a natural progression, and I just needed kind of a buddy to light the fire under me to actually make those proactive decisions and take those steps to actually get there. So I took the LSAT, and I knew I wouldn't go to law school out in New York. One, the affordability, it just wasn't possible. And so I started looking at schools back home. And I think it's funny that all three of us went to Capital, which is a very, I know, paralegal friendly and very friendly with kind of, I think, people that had experience before going to law school. It's not really a straight out of college kind of law school, which I really liked. But both my parents went to Capital. I got in, I had saved money from working in New York, which was helpful. And I got a job during on-campus interviews for a summer associate position at Hahn Lozier and Parks. I did general litigation. I ended up getting hired from that summer associate position. And I worked there for a number of years doing just general litigation. COVID hit and labor and employment got really hot at that time. And I did not have a specialty. And unfortunately, Hahn Lozier's labor and employment team is based out of Cleveland. And so I kind of started looking around for other firms that were specializing in that. And somebody I went to college with actually worked at Fisher Phillips as an associate, and he was moving to our Charlotte, North Carolina office. And we had kind of connected. I mean, we had kept in touch after college, obviously, but we had connected on that. And he was like, I'm leaving, so this is going to be open soon. And that's kind of how I got to where I am. And I love it. And, you know, Nelva and I do basically the same thing, labor and employment on the management side. And it's very interesting. I couldn't be happier with the move. I mean, it's been great.
Great. Okay, so I'm curious, having worked as a paralegal before and during law school, do you think that that experience and the work that you were doing as a paralegal, do you think that helped, or do you think it confused the issues and hindered your progress in law school?
I would say for some aspects it was helpful. But in other aspects, you know, law school is very Socratic and not real world like. So, you know, read this case from, you know, 1850 and, you know, analyze it. And, you know, that's real world practice is not that way at all. And so I think that for law school, maybe it was a little bit of difficulty, but I think, you know, some of the experience of being an older student and having, you know, experience of being out in the world first and then, you know, coming in and doing it, a student is different than, like Teresa said, Anita said, going straight out of undergrad to law school. I think that helped, especially in the night program, which is mostly older working students. But what I will say is that it's extremely helpful when you graduate from law school and try to get a real job is having that real world experience. I feel like law school, unless you do a summer associate or an intern during the summers, has no idea what you do in the real world with practice. And having that paralegal experience, especially if you continue to do the type of work you did before, if you do the same type of law, to me was extremely helpful because you could just jump right in. It wasn't a learning curve.
Yeah, I agree completely. You used many of the same words that I was going to use, that the academics of the law in law school are so different than real life. And except that I knew how to read cases, I knew how to, you know, find the holding in a case. In many ways, it was made it more difficult for me, especially in my first year writing, because I knew how to write for real life. And I had to unthink that process, unlearn that process to be able to write the way that my professors wanted me to write. And I really struggled with that. I had a really hard time with that in my first semester of law school. Thankfully, I was able to overcome it and had a successful law school career. But the other thing that I would echo from both of my colleagues is as we've been talking, the notion of the importance of developing relationships, I can't stress enough how important it is to develop relationships. And the best way to, or one of the ways to do that is through PAYCO, through bar association memberships, through having opportunities to just meet more people and have people know who you are, and forming those relationships and making those connections is so important as you go down the road.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
I'd echo everything that Nelva and Nita said. I mean, especially Nelva saying being older helped. I mean, that was, I think, more helpful for me than my actual experience as a paralegal. I think I was in the day session at Capitol, so I actually went to school with a lot of people who were straight from undergrad. And there's definitely, I think, a difference in the few students who had taken time off to kind of get out there in the real world and work versus those who went straight from undergrad. The ones that went straight from undergrad were very much in a school bubble. They had been to school for the last 20 years of their life. And they came in, and you kind of had the group that were like, this is just like college. I can take a nap. I can skip this class. And you know, it's chill, it's all good, we're here to make friends, that kind of group. And then you had the others that were like the gunners that you always hear about, oftentimes in a negative way in movies and TV shows, who were like, I will step on anybody to get to the top. And I think for those that worked, at least my observation of those in my date session, those that worked beforehand understood that it's really about the relationships you're building in law school. These are going to be your colleagues someday. These might be your future employers. This person might have, this sounds obnoxious, but this person might have a dad or a brother or a sister at a firm that you want to be with. And the relationship building aspect, I think, is quite possibly the most important part of law school. And I got advice early on that there's that saying, you know, it's all about who you know. And somebody once told me it's not about who you know, it's who knows you. You could know everybody, but it doesn't matter if they have no idea who you are. And so I think establishing a reputation early on in law school as being, you know, determined and successful and serious about what you're doing, but also not being a jerk about it and not being somebody who's going to stand on somebody else. Be nice, collegial, treat it as if it's a job. These are your colleagues. They will be your colleagues someday.
Yes, and it's much easier to get opposing counsel to agree to your continuance or your way of thinking if you have extended that same courtesy to them in the past.
Yes, absolutely. It never stops. I mean, law school is the start, but it will go on until you retire.
Right.
And if I could just make one other point about it, one thing that was helpful to me, having worked in the community, having already a decision that I wanted to be a lawyer, made all of the hard times, I could, you know, power through them, knowing I had this goal at the end. I recently conducted a character and fitness interview of a young woman who is preparing to, is hopeful to sit for the bar. She's never even while she's been in law school, never about that, about, you know, how she was going to pay for law school if she wasn't working as a lawyer. And she said, yeah, I guess I have to decide if I really want to be a lawyer or not. And I thought,
goodness.
okay, you're really far in the process. And so for me, there was never a question. I wanted to be a lawyer. There was nobody that was more happy at when we had our first introduction to law school, for the dean to say, welcome to law school. I was like, yes, made it. I was so happy to be there. And then when we graduated and, you know, to be sworn in, I think I was the happiest person in the auditorium because I had seen this long-term goal that I had fulfilled in being admitted to the bar and graduating law school. And my daughter was up in the balcony and she said, "That's my mom." And so it was just such a great experience. And knowing that that was what I wanted to do made all of the hard work really worth it.
Definitely, I'm sure. One thing that I'm also curious about is how, you know, a couple of things, you know, first of all, when you were working as a paralegal and you went to your attorney and said, I'm going to law school, how did they react? How supportive were they of that journey? And then once you finished law school and began practicing as an attorney, what was that transition like as far as people seeing you as an attorney rather than as a paralegal?
I'll go first just because I can make mine quick. I was a paralegal out in New York, so I don't have a whole lot to contribute to this. You know, when I told them I was going to law school and it was in Ohio, they were extremely supportive, even though they knew I wouldn't be back. And I think it was one of those things where, you know, there probably wasn't a sense of competition of, well, I hope you come back, you better come back. Now we're competing against another firm to get you back as an attorney. So there wasn't as much, I think, pressure on their end to keep me while I was in law school, because obviously I wasn't going to be there, or to get me back as an attorney, because I think we had all just kind of had come to the fact that I would stay in Ohio most likely after law school. So I don't have a whole lot to contribute other than my firm at the time was very supportive. They actually threw a going away party for me and the other paralegal. And I really had a great experience, but I know that that was probably a unique experience and may not be the general majority experience.
Well, I would say so. I was already in law school when I got hired with my firm where I was a paralegal. So they already knew I was in law school. I think maybe that was part of the reason I was hired. But I also think they just needed a paralegal. So it probably wouldn't have mattered a whole lot. But the partners that I worked with were extremely supportive during that time. They allowed me to flex my hours so that on school days I could come in early and leave early. And then on non-school days, I came in a little bit later because, as Nita will attest, we were at school till 9:30 at night sometimes, and then you drive home. So I could come in a little bit later on non-school days, and work later. So they were very good about flexing that time for me. And, you know, I don't think there was any concern on their behalf that I wouldn't continue to stay with the firm. I will say when I graduated from law school, I don't know about Nita's experience, but it was the height of the recession. Like, you were lucky to get a job. It was not a good time. You know, there were a lot of people that we graduated with that I knew couldn't get a job as an attorney because people were laying off or they just weren't hiring. So I felt lucky to just have a job with a firm that I didn't have to actually go work for. You know, because I mean, it's a dog eat dog world too. And, you know, I was a night student. I didn't say I wasn't top of my class. I wasn't stellar, you know, but I graduated and, you know, I couldn't go into another firm and say I'm the top 5% or I'm the top 2%. You know, here's my transcript. I didn't have the ability to do it. So I was lucky again that my firm didn't care about that and just were like, okay, you graduated. As soon as you are, you know, licensed and, you know, you pass the bar, you know, they just basically started working me as an attorney right away, and very supportive in that. And, you know, every attorney there was very supportive in the transition. You know, I didn't get any, you know, feedback or biting or anything about it. And so that was very, very nice. You know, I was really happy with that. And I would say one of the other things that I thought was really good, and I don't know if all firms would do this, is they gave me time off to study for the bar. I mean, that was huge. So, I worked part-time for the month of June, and then they gave the entire month of July off for me to study. That was just kind of a perk that I got. And I don't think you'd get that a lot of places, and especially not paid. But I think, again, a benefit of working for an attorney is they know what you're going through, and they know how important it is, and they want you to pass, obviously. So, yeah, I think I was very lucky. It was a smaller firm, so I think that helped, but I think I was very lucky there.
Yeah, so at Thompson Hine, they were happy that I started law school, but it wasn't to impact any of my job duties or my billable requirements or anything else. Great, good for you, rah rah, but there wasn't any accommodation made. In fact, one year, one of the partners was annoyed that he had a trial when I had finals week. And so he was going to talk to the dean to get my finals moved to another time so that it would not interfere with his trial, which did not happen. But I had to give him my blocks of hours of when I would be available and when I would not, because of my finals schedule. And when I went to then in our last year of law school, when I went to Stanley Law Group to practice intellectual property, primarily patent litigation, I was hired there with the notion that I would come in as a paralegal but stay as a lawyer. And I negotiated at that time that I would have 6 weeks off before the bar exam in order to prepare. Because the one thing I knew for sure was I did not want to take the bar exam more than once. I wanted to be one and done. And I have a similar story. I was not in the top of my class. I was not the kind of applicant that was going to be attractive to big law firms. And I knew that it was just a fact of life. And it was with a family, with going to law school at night and a very busy litigation practice during the day, it was just not likely that I was ever going to be at the top of my class. But so the transition for me was fine, because when I was hired at Stanley, it was with that in mind, that I would stay as a lawyer. And so I practiced patent law with them.
Okay. Did you experience any difficulties with people saying, giving you, coming to you and saying, okay, I need you to draft this, I need you to do this paralegal duty, this paralegal activity here, do this, and you're saying, but wait a minute, I'm an attorney now. Was that a seamless transition, or did you have to remind people that, hey, you need to give me something a little bit more substantive, I'm an attorney now?
Yeah, for me, that was not a difficult transition. And I think primarily because that's how it was intended to be when I was hired in. So that wasn't a difficult transition. In fact, we had already hired another paralegal as I was nearing the end of my law school life, in order to bring someone else in that was going to follow me in that position, knowing that I would transition to being a lawyer and I was already going to all of the trials and doing everything that I think, sort of newer lawyers kind of expect to do anyway. So although I had the title of paralegal, I was more kind of in a hybrid type of situation.
Okay, great. Let's see, where should we go now? Well, first of all, does anybody have any specific questions? Okay.
And if anyone wants to hear about it, I'm happy to talk about my grandkids.
Oh, yeah, we can always talk about our grandkids. Let's see.
Yes, I can come up with a question. I know you guys all talked about you went to law school at night. Is there a reason you chose that path? And if so, how do you think it affected not only like your career long-term wise as a paralegal, but also as an attorney? Or was the full-time option? I know Teresa, you said you were the daytime student. Just kind of what made you make those decisions, and then how did that affect you guys long-term?
Well, I couldn't quit my job. The long and short of mine is I had to work. So
Me too.
I did not have kids at the time, but I was married. So I was still younger, but not that young, but I just didn't have the option to quit. And I also financially, to me, as I had been already working for a while and been out, I just didn't see a benefit in racking up more debt to go to school. I already had to, obviously take loans for the tuition, but to take additional loans on top for living expenses, which is what happens a lot of times for students that go during the day if they can't pay out of pocket. I just couldn't stomach that. So I, chose to go at night, and I don't know if I would have been able to get in the daytime program. I don't know. I mean, I had a really good GPA at undergrad, but I don't think my LSAT score was through the roof. So, that may have, the night program also will accept people that don't make into the day program. So that was also kind of a helpful thing. And, it makes you work for it. I mean, you don't get the summers off. We have school in the summer and during the, 3 nights a week during the school year. It really doesn't let up and it's 4 years instead of 3. But you know what, as to becoming an attorney, I actually found that people are very impressed by that. Other lawyers especially are very impressed by the fact that you worked full time and went to school at night. I mean, in law school, not just an undergrad or a master's. A lot of people are very impressed by it. Shows dedication, it shows hard work, it shows motivation. And so sometimes I feel like that gets put a little bit higher than otherwise. It just shows that you had the experience and thoughtfulness to kind of do that for all that time period. So I think it's been helpful, but that's why I chose to go at night. I didn't really have a choice.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I don't think my husband and I even considered that I would be a day student. But I'm glad that I didn't have that break in my career. I'm glad that I continued on with the daily practice of law. And I do think that ultimately it was beneficial to my career to just continue on working full time. And I agree with the comments that, so many people have said, wow, that's such an accomplishment to go to law school at night, be part of a firm and practice law during the day. And for us, I was raising a family, and people have made that comment a number of times. But that's an interesting, thought-provoking question, because I don't think it's anything my husband and I ever considered that I would do anything other than be in the night program.
Okay. Now you're an attorney. Okay, well, of course, now you're an attorney, and after having had the experience of being a paralegal, do you think that it gives you a better understanding of what appropriate tasks are for a paralegal? And do you think that maybe you have better insights that some of your other colleagues may not have, as far as knowing the best way to utilize your paralegals and what kinds of assignments are appropriate?
I'll jump in. Yeah, I think so. I mean, to be honest with you, so the way kind of the structure works at most firms is I feel like you don't really get to pick and choose the assignments the paralegal does. It's kind of just they're known for doing certain things. And they're hired on to do those things. So when you get those things, you know, it automatically goes to them. There are things I would love to pass off that I simply don't want to do. And I think a paralegal is perfectly capable of doing. But you get into kind of like the internal politics of law firm structure. I mean, law firms are business and there's certain hourly rates, and mine are more expensive than a paralegal's. So this assignment's going to come to me, even though I think a paralegal could do it. So in that regard, I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of set at, I mean, both firms I worked at, it was kind of known what was paralegal work and what is attorney work. I don't really get to call the shots on that. But I think what was helpful for me is that I kind of understand a paralegal's schedule and a paralegal's capacity, I think, better than others. You know, at least at the last firms, my last firm and this firm that I'm with, most paralegals don't have the same hours requirement as associates or partners, obviously. And I think that gets lost on some of the higher ups, that this paralegal is going to work this amount of hours during the day, and then they're going to go home. And that's it. They're not going to take this work home and bill 2,000 hours, which is the same that an attorney is doing. So I think for me, it's helped me be, I think, a little more cognizant of what they can do before the day is done, and I don't think I set them up to fail. I think some other attorneys might do that unknowingly, give them an assignment at 4 o'clock that can't be done in an hour or two. And they expect it to be done that night. Well, it's not going to get done that night. And you've just unleashed, you know, a world of stress and anxiety on somebody who this really isn't, you know, part of their job. There's not really any incentive to bill like an attorney. So I think that has been helpful, having that inside knowledge of being a paralegal for a number of years and knowing kind of the schedule and when and during the day to get those assignments to them has been, I think, pretty valuable.
Yeah, I think I echo that. I feel like, I mean, I have a paralegal that specifically does workers' comp work with me. But I also have a legal assistant that's not a paralegal and does not have billable hour requirements. So I make that choice and decision as to, this is something that I'll bill the client for, so I want my paralegal to do it. Also, it's a little bit more complex, and I know they know what needs to be done. But this other thing is a simple thing that I can't bill the client for, so I'm going to have a legal assistant do it. You know, so, or legal administrative assistants, what I think they're called. So, you know, I try to divvy it up and make sure I'm conscious about that. And it's exactly what Teresa said, is that I know for a fact there are attorneys that will send something over at 4:30 and just say, I need it done tonight. I don't care how you do it, but I need it done. And it's like, you got to be conscious again. What's the incentive of working? They're not going to get overtime. So, well, I guess sometimes they do. But, you know, that's not what they are hired to do, to work a bunch of overtime and work long hours. And, you know, it puts stress and anxiety on that person. So usually if I'm doing that, I'm like, this can wait till the morning. Like, you don't have to do this tonight. I try to make sure I give clear instructions for that, because I don't want to do that to anybody. I don't think that's fair. And I think that there are attorneys out there, probably ones that have been around the block for quite a while, that just don't think twice about that. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, and I think many attorneys have no idea how long it will take to do something. I mean, I've personally received that 5 minutes till 5 assignment of, our merit brief is due tomorrow. Can you whip together the table of authorities? And not understanding that that's going to take a little while. That's not something that I can, you know, just do in 5 minutes. That's going to need some time and some attention. And let's be realistic about what might happen here.
Yeah, I don't know that I really have anything to add. I want to say that I am more cognizant of of the paralegals and what they offer, and the fact that they are not, and I don't mean this in the way probably this is going to sound, they're not glorified secretaries, right? We all have different roles. We're all part of a team, and we have different roles to get the work done. But I also would not ask any of my team members to stay and work on one of my projects unless I was staying there working too. So I think we probably have a different recognition of what it takes to get a job done, and the ability to work as a team together.
I'm sure that's true. You know, I hear a lot of times about attorneys who really don't have, and I'm so glad that you ladies do have a good awareness of what's an appropriate assignment for a paralegal, what's within the realm of their abilities, you know, what's realistic. I know I've heard a lot of stories about attorneys who you know, an attorney that says, "Oh my goodness, you know how to draft discovery requests?" Well, yes, absolutely we do. And maybe that's something that he's kept on his plate rather than assigning to a paralegal simply because he doesn't know that's something that they can do. So do you ever find yourself um speaking to an attorney who maybe is not as aware of what they can and should be asking their paralegals to do? And do you ever find yourself prodding them gently in another direction or anything like that?
I think I don't take the initiative. I'll be honest. I don't take the initiative because I don't know. We all have separate offices. We're not in a kind of fishbowl setup. So I never know if what I'm hearing or perceiving is actually the correct. So I think anytime that I speak with our paralegal, or a new paralegal is hired, I always let them know that they can come to me if they have kind of conflicting assignments or scheduling issues, or they just have difficulty kind of getting through to an attorney. And then from there, I will speak with that attorney. And that's kind of how it was when I was a first year attorney. That's how, you know, some of the senior associates and new partners told me to handle things, was come to me and we will handle it because we've been here longer. We understand the internal politics. We have longer lasting, better relationships with the people here because we've been here longer. And so I always let them know, like, come to me, it'll be confidential. If you're really struggling to get something done or struggling with an attitude or just personality types or conflicting, and I will do my best to kind of intervene, but I won't take that initiative because God forbid I just read the room wrong. And then I have egg on my face, and you know, it's, you work with these people day in and day out, and you don't want to get something wrong.
Right, definitely.
I've never had that experience. So yeah, I mean, I think, but again, there were paralegals in my firm now. I mean, in my old firm too, with Angie, I think, you know, there were paralegals that you guys had specific groups, specific things to work on. As far as I knew, there wasn't like people telling you to do different things, but I'd say at the firm I'm at now, which is more of a general practice firm, you know, I didn't do I worked with one paralegal at that firm, and I still do, but I mean, I may have used other paralegals to do some litigation work, but there were other attorneys that did more litigation, and they had those kind of control over those paralegals. So I'm not sure how that worked, but you know, but I always try to, like Teresa said, try to, you know, be encouraging, you know, try to I think it's good communication is important. I just feel like a lot of times that you don't get that in law firms, especially with staff. I just feel like, you know, one of the things our firm prides ourselves on is keeping open lines of communication with the staff. which includes paralegals, legal administrative assistants, all of that. And that attorneys should not treat the staff differently. That's one thing that they're very strong about. And that's something that I think is very important as well, is just because you have a law degree and you make, twice as much as this person does not mean that you are better than that person, sort of thing.
But, to your point about, encouraging others to make additional use or make use at all of the paralegals, there have been times when someone has brought something to me and I have said, oh, have you talked to one of the paralegals? I know that person would do a great job with this. And a lot of times the response is, oh gosh, I didn't know that they can do that kind of work, or that they've done that work in the past. And I would say, I'm happy to sort of supervise it. I can overlook the work product before it comes to you. But I think it is a point well taken for especially those of us that have sort of a paralegal love in our heart, and to encourage others in our firms to make better or different use of paralegals.
Absolutely. We do have a question. The question is, do you think the role of the paralegal has changed over the years? How did the attorneys you worked for utilize you as paralegal versus how do you utilize paralegals in your daily practice?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yes, I think it's changed over the years. And I think it's going to continue to change. I think how I see it going is, I think eventually paralegals and legal administrative assistants will merge into one role. And I think the job of legal administrative assistants, secretaries, however your firm classifies them, will become obsolete and it'll just be a paralegal. And I think the paralegal will be tasked with doing some administrative things, non-billable work, and then billable work. I don't know if the hours would change, because now you're doing a lot more administrative things, because you've taken on essentially a legal secretary role as well. But I think the paralegal role will exist, and for our entire generation, for as long as we live. But I do think the legal administrative assistant role is dwindling a little bit, and I think that they will merge into one. And that's largely just, we're getting more and more attorneys who grew up with computers, grew up with the internet, grew up kind of learning the skills that were really reserved for secretarial work. They're now teaching, in middle school, high school, all that. So I just think that role will diminish, but it will morph into the paralegal.
That's an interesting perspective, and a point well taken about how, growing up with technology, just makes the practice of law different than it was. When I started in my first job in the legal community in 1980, I was a paralegal for almost 25 years before I went to law school. So, I can really talk about back in the day. We were still looking at books as opposed to, doing everything online and everything automated. So that's an interesting perspective. I do think that, especially in big law, the billable hours have become so competitive that it's really hard to get people to cram work down, because, especially first and second year lawyer, I would say anybody under 5 years, they are just, that is their main focus, is meeting the billable requirements. And as salaries go up, the responsibility for billable requirements just becomes, more concrete, and it makes it harder to kind of cram things down. And so it's, I think it is a point well taken about how the method for how we practice law is so much different now, given all of the advancements in technology, than it was, even 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. I mean, a lot of tasks that maybe paralegals did 15 years ago is something that can be easily done in half the time. It's copying and pasting it from other documents. A lot of times you're just reusing the same thing. Discovery requests, deposition notice, all of that can be done, I think, in a shorter amount of time, which, paralegal, one of the things that I see as differentiate from a legal administrative assistant is you guys have billable hours. But if the task that used to take you 3 hours now only takes an hour, that's to your detriment, in my opinion. And one of the other things that I find it harder. There are some tasks that I think are clearly more of a secretarial task that I would not want to ask a paralegal to do, like copy projects, putting together binders, that sort of thing. I don't think that's something that would be fair to ask a paralegal to do. You didn't go to school to do that. But I find it harder in some areas that we have a paralegal with that certificate. And a lot of times, I don't do a lot of litigation in my practice. Sometimes I have litigation, but not a lot. And I feel like paralegals are very vital to litigation practices. I think they're huge for that. But for the type of practice I do, or other practices like a corporate transaction or things like that, just may not have the use that we used to. So it's kind of an influx almost. It's very interesting. And to Nita's point, I think those first year, second year associates are like, I just do the work myself because I'm going to bill my 2,500 hours and get my bonus. And, it's not until you get to maybe your 8th or 9th year before you're like, I don't want to do that work.
I don't care.
Please take it.
Yeah, please, somebody else do it. I'm not working till 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think it's definitely evolved since when Nita started practicing till what it is today. That is for sure.
And I would really encourage you to sort of find a niche. Make yourself indispensable for something. Whether that is becoming the guru of electronic discovery at your firm, or somehow finding something that you are the best at, and make sure everybody knows that, and then they'll come to you because, oh, I need this done. Oh, go there. They're the one who knows how to do that. And it could even be something as simple like, if you are a notary, taking the steps so that you can be an electronic notary. As a lawyer, I did that when COVID hit and we were at home, and in order to find kind of something to do, I became an electronic notary. And that was something that carried through, that I was in with our litigation practice. I was able to notarize affidavits and everything else electronically. And I didn't have to be a lawyer to do that. I just had to be a notary to do that. So just find some kind of a niche that makes you, that sets you apart and kind of makes you indispensable. And that's going to be the best way to, make yourself the most productive.
Definitely good advice. Okay, we've got about a minute left. And so just real quickly, for any paralegals that might be entertaining the prospect of law school, what's your best advice?
I
was gonna
go ahead.
Well, I think it depends if you want to go to school at night or during the day. If you're going to go at night, make sure it's absolutely what you want to do. Like think long and hard about it. Make sure if you have a family, they're on board with it. because it's a huge sacrifice. It's your 4 years of your life are pretty much gone. And then if you're with a firm, you know, talk to them about it, because I think it's a huge help. Again, if you like where you're at, obviously too, that once you are done with your legal career, that you've kind of got an in. Even if it's maybe not where you want to be for the rest of your career, it's a place to start. It's a way to get experience, because you are going to be one of however many graduate that year, fighting for a job. And, you know, if you do it at night, you may not have the top stellar grade of somebody coming out of Ohio State in the top 10%. So it's always good, as we talked about earlier, is get that relationship, build that relationship. So that would be my advice.
Okay.
I was gonna say, figure out your financial health first. I think, you know, a lot of people, some really good friends of mine, they came into law school and they had dreams of being a public defender, right? And it's a super admirable job, super important job. They start off making $35K a year. And
Right.
some of these kids have $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in student debt. And all of a sudden that dream job isn't a dream anymore. You know, their life is different and their life is harder than it was before. And all of a sudden, all of that interest in doing that particular job fades away and they're bootstrapped to this debt. So I think the most important thing, no matter how badly you want it, is to really sit down and figure out the financial realities of it. And again, even if you can afford to go to law school, the flip side of that is that if you take a day program, that's 3 years of not working. So even if you're not going to take on debt, you're not going to be earning anything during those 3 years either. So no matter what, it is a financial sacrifice. And I can't stress enough how important it is to really think about it and really consider it.
That
Sounds like
is
really good.
wise advice.
Sounds like very sound advice.
Yes.
Very sound advice. Well, ladies, we are out of time. We want to thank you again for being with us today, and talking about your career path. And we have enjoyed this immensely. Perhaps we'll have you back someday.
That'd be great. It was a great
Okay.
time. Nelda,
Yep.
I'm so glad I got to see you again.
Yes, I know. It's been a long time. Same to you, Angie.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone. Yes, this was
so
great.
much.
Thanks for being here, ladies, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Good luck, everyone.